Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Taylors of Tech live on Twitch. I have just finished a very busy week, so I want to take it easy. I enjoy these streams. I do. I'm not just saying that. Getting questions, getting that real-time interaction from you is always a highlight. I enjoy doing this because instead of taking the process of filming a video, editing the video, exporting, uploading, then hearing your responses, and then replying in another video or replying in a comment, this is just all happening in front of us, which is so much nicer. But it's been a busy week. I mean, just at the beginning of the week, we started very busily on Monday with Quadruple UDC, and then a couple days ago we had the Tesla Plaid event, which I also covered and did recap videos on, and we just finished the podcast for it. So it's been a busy week, and I was like, you know what? I just want to hang out with whoever's available on Twitch. I don't care what you guys ask about. I don't care what the subject is. If you want me to ramble, I'll ramble. I can always ramble. But anyway, it's been a while, so I'm ready for the weekend. I'm ready to take a few days off. But either way, I just figured before I say goodbye for a few days, I would just check in with you guys, make sure if there's any questions or any subjects I'm not covering, you can bring them up here. That's the power of live. RM2646 says, happy Saturday, but still depressed over Dodo. I mean, it was disappointing in most of the areas we were hoping for development, whether it be M1X or iPadOS. I kind of am offended by iPadOS 15, but simultaneously, I'm not that upset about not getting M1X just because I know that is coming. It may not be called M1X or something, but it is still going to be, like, we know the transition's happening. Tim Cook confirmed that. It's not like speculation that the rest of the Mac line will get faster silicon. That's for sure happening. Very reliable leaker Tim Cook has told us to expect such a thing. So that name's taken. Thank you for the Twitch Prime for 29 months. He says, hello, how are y'all? My spirits are high, but my energy is low. I'm just tired from a long week. It's been a longer week for me than usual. But the flip side of things I was going to say was iOS 15 surprised me. It exceeded my expectations. I did not think iOS 15 was going to be that big a deal, but the updates to Safari, in my opinion, are super noticeable. I love the new weather app. I love the updates to messages. I don't care much about Focus, though. I'm curious if you guys are different, but for me at least, I have kind of done a decent job, not to give myself too much credit, but I feel like I do a decent job with my digital well-being, and I don't need help from the operating system itself. Like, I just leave most applications' notifications turned off, and I'm like willing to turn on notifications for messages, and that's about it. And if I want to figure out what's going on within an app, I'm like, I'll open that app if I want to know. Like, if I want to get some new email, or if I want to check Twitter notifications or Discord notifications, believe me, like, I'll tune in. Okay, I'll open those apps when I'm ready, but I don't need them hollering at me or pinging my Apple Watch all the time. So I'm just like, most of the apps I have notified off, and when I tried to set up focusing, I didn't really find a bunch of use for it. It was like, who can text you during these times? And I was like, I don't know, anybody can text me, but I'll check messages if I want to get back to them. I don't need to let certain people ping me with messages and other people not ping me with messages, because I generally text like less than 10 people regularly. So it's not that big a deal for me to make sure that certain people I get notified for texts and certain people I don't. I mean, my wife's probably the most important, and she's in the other room. So either way, I wasn't super into the focus features, but I'm curious if you guys have had different experience or if that's just me. Expos1, thank you for the bits. It says, I hope the next iPad mini has no home button. Me too. Like, the iPad Air didn't quite sit right with me just because it was a little bit too expensive. I thought it would have been much better at $500, and even if it had to be $600, I would have preferred it had Face ID, but the fact that it has Touch ID and it's $600 doesn't quite sit right with me. But I do agree that if we could finally get the iPad mini onto this more futuristic squared off design with USB-C, and it would basically be the iPad Air's little brother, that would fit so well in the lineup, for one, because that means that only the budget iPad would have Lightning, and I love that idea. is just the budget iPad is just old and dated, but everything else has moved on to no home button, and everything else has moved on to complete gesture control, no headphone jacks, and everything else is Type-C. I would be so happy. I would be very tempted for the iPad mini to be like an iPhone replacement, honestly. So frankly, yeah, I really hope the next iPad mini doesn't have a home button, because that would bring so much more consistency with the lineup. You know, eventually all iPads can be home buttonless, and I would very much appreciate that. Cyber Octoling, thank you for the Twitch Prime as well. Do you use an electric toothbrush, and why do Americans have such great teeth compared to us? I don't know. I think that's a stereotype. I don't know if that's factual, but I do use an electric toothbrush. Yes, I did a vlog about it earlier this year. It's kind of cool. I don't think you need one, but if you got one, yeah, it's supposed to help a little bit. Let's see. Mark leaked that the next iPad will have a glass back for wireless charging. That will be the dream, but I'm interested in your thoughts. Well, we talked about that in a previous Twitch stream. I don't think he said it will have a glass back. He said they were experimenting with wireless charging on the iPad. We went over that Bloomberg report a couple weeks ago, I think. And essentially we were saying, I don't think it's confirmed. They were saying they were prototyping. And the next iPad Pro is very far out, honestly. The hardware they've given the current iPad Pro is so overkill, and there's going to be so little reasons to update that thing for a long time. Like, the M1 chip is plenty fast for the iPad Pro, as was the A12Z, to be fair, but the A12Z was barely different from the A12X. So kind of like Marquez was saying, it's just refinement on top of refinement on top of refinement, and iPadOS is still the limiting factor here. So, man, that's a good question. What do they do with iPad Pro hardware now? Like a year and a half from today. So maybe the October event of 2022. How do they make the iPad Pro better? I guess you can bring mini LED to the smaller version, but that's kind of an update just for one of them. It's not a big update for the big one. What would the big one get? I wouldn't mind, honestly, if they just decided to switch this Apple logo to landscape, especially on the 12.9-inch model, because that's used in landscape so often. So yeah, that's a small thing. That's not a functional thing. I mean, I never see that, but I guess I would prefer having more Thunderbolt ports. If you could have more than one, that would be nice. But again, it doesn't really matter too much if iPadOS is still going to be blown up iOS. So more ports isn't a huge deal. I guess you can improve the camera. More cameras, yay! Give it a new chip for some reason. Yeah, because the M1 isn't fast enough. Exactly. Let's see, Landon. I don't know how to say his name. I'm just going to say Landon. I'm excited for Focus for some live event work I do, so I can only get needed communication notifications. Okay. Well, I'm glad you can find some use out of it, because I wanted to use Focus, but as soon as I set it up, I was like, I couldn't think of a situation where I wanted certain people to text me, but not others. I'm like, I'll just put on Do Not Disturb, and I'll get the text, but it won't make a noise or anything. Let's see. I wish Apple would release a separate iPad Pro S, that's a funny name, that only runs on the iPad Pro, because I feel that iPadOS 15 was limited by the older non-Pro iPads it needed to support. I think that's too complicated. Honestly, I think with the current existence of iPadOS versus iOS, they're so dang similar. Like, I honestly don't think we need a different... I don't think iPadOS needs to be separate from iOS. With so many similarities in features and functionality between the iPhone and the iPad has really not gained much else over the years. I don't understand why they decided to call it iPadOS. So if you wanted to give... I don't understand why the iPad Pro would need to run something different from iPadOS currently. Just make iPadOS better. You know, there's all kinds of features that Apple brought to macOS Monterey that are only features for the M1 Macs. So when it comes to the Mac lineup, Apple's not like, okay, if we introduce a feature on macOS, we have to make sure that the trash can Mac Pro from 2013 can also get this feature. It's like, no, we can do some features that only work with the M1 Macs because they're the M1 and they're the latest generation. And you might get a few of the features on the older Macs, but not all of them. That's how I view it for the iPadOS. I'm like, yeah, you can bring some pro class features just to the M1 iPads. You can say, okay, you need this much RAM or you need this much CPU power or GPU power in order to gain these features with iPadOS 15. Just because you want to bring backwards compatibility to the iPad Air 2 and the Mini 4 and those really old iPads, you can give them some features, but not all of them. That's fine. I think they've done that in the past too, right? They brought, I forget which iOS it was, but there was one iOS that had split screen multitasking, and they gave that to the more recent generation iPads, but they didn't give it to the older generations one because they didn't have the RAM for it. I'm like, okay, M1 iPad Pro has 8 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs of RAM. You could come up with a few features that say only these iPads can do that, or even storage things. Like, if I know they're not going to do dual booting. Again, I gave up on this, but as we're still ranting about it, you could say you can only do dual booting if you have a certain storage configuration or more. Like, you need 1 terabyte of space in order to dual boot, and if you don't buy a 1 terabyte iPad, then you can't dual boot. I'll be like, fine, that's fine. I'll pay what I need to pay to get the product I want, but currently it doesn't really exist. Future Proof 4, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub. Dominator's Ghost says, I had the money ready for new MacBooks and now they didn't come. I have to buy one anyway due to promotion at work, so I'm trying to get a brand new M1 MacBook Pro on eBay for around £850. Wow, that's a pretty good value, I think. I don't know what the pounds are new in wherever you are, England, I think. But yeah, $850 for the MacBook Pro. That's substantially cheaper. Good luck with that. I hope it works out. Let's see. YJ says, I was thinking of the dual boot macOS being branded as iPad Pro OS so others won't get salty. Yeah, I mean, some people I've seen make that argument of like the iPad OS is built to be simple and clean and streamlined, and I was like, yeah, that's why it's okay to dual boot. That would be separating iPad OS from Mac OS. It's not trying to merge the two. You're not trying to turn the iPad into a Mac. You're just saying the iPad can do Mac-like things, just like it gained mouse support, which it used to not have. RM2646 says, I'm the type of guy to buy a MacBook and an iPad at the same time, but money doesn't grow on trees, so Universal Control came, and now I don't have to buy the Magic Keyboard. Yeah, I was just saying that during the podcast today. I was like, I probably would have thought twice about using a Magic Keyboard case if Universal Control was a thing like a little over a year ago. And I could control my iPad with my keyboard and mouse as I'm using my Mac. I don't have to unpair them or anything. Like, that would have definitely made me think twice about it. I think there's a lot of people that would buy a new iPad and a Mac even at the same time. That's not the majority of people, but that demographic does exist. You know, even, you know, for the record, even if my iPad could dual boot into Mac OS, I would still get a Mac. The M1 isn't quite faster than my iMac Pro, so even if they did allow dual booting, it's not like I would be ditching my Mac. I would still opt for M1X or a Mac Pro with the whatever they call that chip, the M1T or P1 or whatever they want to call it. I would still be interested in getting a faster Mac. It's just that if I want a laptop, if I'm going to have a laptop, I want it to have the best hardware and the best software, and that's just difficult to justify right now. PB says, iPad Pro is just not Pro, seeing as they won't allow Mac OS on iPad. They should really do iPad OS Pro to account for this issue of backwards compatibility with the lower power ones. I don't like that name. I don't like that branding because, in my opinion, iOS 15 and iPad OS have way too much in common. They barely justify being separate. So I'm not for the term iPad OS Pro. All I'm saying is, similar to Mac OS Monterey and previous generations of iOS, you can bring features that are only available on newer models. You don't have to break apart iPad OS into iPad OS Pro. You can just say, these features are available on the new iPads, these ones are not. It's that simple to me. Like, something someone brought up is Siri working offline. That's kind of a big deal for iOS 15. For the longest time, people have been wanting Siri and that dictation processing to be done locally, and you don't send that recording to a server, and then the server spits back the response. Now, even if you're on airplane mode and you don't have any internet, you can use Siri. I was talking about that feature during my recap video. People pointed out that's only available on iPhones with the A12 chip or newer. So if you have an iPhone that's A11 chip or older, it's cool that iOS 15 goes all the way back to the 6S, but that was a feature they were talking about that's not available on every device that runs iOS 15. It's okay. I don't see the big problem. It's okay to have features that are only available on some hardware but not the old ones. So if you want to completely take advantage of the iPad Pro M1 hardware, but you can't optimize that for the iPad mini, or you can't optimize that for the iPad Air, that's okay. Just be like, that requires an M1. That's an upsell. That's what Apple does all the time. That's what we call, you need to buy this you need to buy this newer iPad, you need to buy this better iPad in order to access that software feature. That's okay. Splitting the functionality between iPads, though, is the opposite of the argument that the iPads are the straightforward and easy-to-use product for everyone, because it makes it more complex for the purchaser. I don't think it makes it more complex personally, because if you want it to just stay as it is with current iPad OS and you're happy with iPad OS, you could still do that. It's not saying when you set up the iPad, it has to ask you, do you want it to have Mac OS or iPad OS? No. You set it up exactly the way it's been set up. You use it the exact same way you've used the iPad. All I'm suggesting is having a setting deep in the settings app that you go into and say, yes, I would like to dual boot, please. And then it has to download a huge Mac OS file. You don't have to ship it with Mac OS. So it's like, if you know how to access it, you can take advantage of it. If you don't know or care about that, you'll never notice. It would never come up. There would never be a notification. There would never be an alert that says, hey, you need to install macOS. No, just make it a backdoor thing. I don't think that makes it more complicated for the purchaser. What to me is more complicated is when people buy a $1,000 or $2,000 iPad Pro and then are confused that it can't do certain things. They're like, wait, why can't it load this video, or why can't it use this software? And people go, oh, because it runs iPad OS. Well, my Mac can do that, and Apple makes that. Why can't the iPad do it? Oh, because the Mac is a Mac and the iPad is an iPad. Like, that's the explanation I keep running into all the time. Even with everyday people, they're like, okay, the iPad has good display, good Apple Pencil support. It's got cellular. It's got all the great cameras, and I like Face ID. Can I do Xcode, or could I do Logic? And they're like, nope. Why not? That Apple doesn't want you to. That's an iPad. iPad's not for that. It's like, I find that more complicated, where it's like, oh, if you want that type of software, if you want to use that type of feature, you want to use that type of Safari extension, you got to get a Mac for that. When you go over to the Mac and you're like, the webcam sucks, it doesn't have Face ID, there's no touch screen, there's no stylus support or anything, and it's like, oh yeah, no, that Macs can't do that. It's like, I find that more distorted, instead of Apple just saying, yes, there is a solution. There is one product that can do all this. You just have to pay a lot for it. It's like, oh, it's Apple. It's expensive. Yeah, we're used to that. Pro Display exists. Anyway, I could rant about the iPad all day. By the way, I am the RM Gaming person. I created this Twitch account a while ago, and I don't know what I was thinking creating this username. I'm trying to remember who that is, but thank you for tuning in. Just got a MacBook Air 2017 with Big Sur, first Mac in years, and it's great, but the only thing that bothers me is the inability to properly maximize a window without going full screen. Does that bug you, or do you do it manually with the mouse and trackpad, i.e. full width sideways as well? Let's see. Inability to properly maximize a window without going full screen. How do you maximize a window without going full screen? I'm not as fluent with Windows, so I'm trying to understand what you mean by that. To me, it's like, I grew up with Mac OS. I did use Windows for like 6 years for a while, but then Windows 10 came out and it got worse and worse, and I just couldn't deal with it anymore. But for Macs, at least, it's always just been like, green button makes it full screen, click it again to make it not full screen. And that's just kind of what I'm used to. So no, I guess that doesn't bug me. I'm kind of used to having lots of windows open on my Mac that I can resize all the time. MacBook Air from 2017, though. That's pre-refresh, right? That's the one with aluminum bezels. I hope you got a good deal on it, because that's getting up there. If you can have a certified refurbished MacBook Pro M1, $1,100 off, which would come out to about 790 pounds. Oh, okay. That's pretty good. When you maximize in Windows, you keep the bar at the bottom? Oh, I see. Huh. I don't know. If I need the bar, I'm just going to, wait, let me full screen Safari here, see what happens. Yeah, if I full screen a window and I want it to take up the entire display, I can just throw my mouse to the bottom of the screen and then the dock shows up. So I don't need that to be there constantly, especially if it's full screen. Then it would be overlapping. That must be a Windows thing I never utilized myself. Sorry. I guess I do not relate. It does not bug me, sorry. To maximize in macOS, you hold Alt and click the green. Oh, okay. Let me try that. Wait, Alt's not a thing. We have Option and Command. The bar is optional on Windows. Okay. Oh, interesting. It did something weird. Oh, when I hold Option and press the green button, it just makes the window bigger. Ever so slightly. That's funny. You can change that in settings. People are saying Option. I guess so, like, okay, if I shrink the window... Can I show this? I'm trying to think. I think I can show this. Well, this display capture is like all wonk. Okay. Here comes the glitchy part. This is going to look weird. So if I resize a window like this, and I make it all small for some reason, and then I hold Option and press the green, that will expand it all the way to the bottom. Hey, look at that. The more you know. Now it's going to get all Inception-y really quick. You can use Magnet to get the Windows Snap feature on Mac. Okay. See, Mac has all this other default stuff. Still can't get over the fact that Apple did dirty to the innocent iPad Pro M1 because of iPadOS 15. Yeah, it's not even about the M1 necessarily. It's like, to me, it's a bigger issue. It's not that the M1 is so powerful and iPadOS can't take advantage of it. It's like, honestly, A12X and A12Z were very powerful, and they've been around for like 3 years now, and there's been like no growth with iPadOS. The fact that it can do the basics, like it can do some photo editing and some light video editing, but if you want to do anything more than light video editing, you have to switch to a Mac or you have to switch to this. I was hoping the iPad could grow and show some type of progress that was a little bit better than widgets on the home screen. Can we talk about how the HomePod is still in the Apple Store for next day delivery? Might pick one up with AppleCare because I feel like I want more sound than stereo HomePod minis. Yeah, I put mine on my desk here, even though I don't have Apple Music, but it's just kind of a cool desk ornament for now. I do like the design overall. It's a cool looking speaker, but it does say a lot because they discontinued it, what, like 3 months ago now? I think it's been like close to 90 days since they said we're no longer going to build it. We're just going to sell out of all existing inventory. So when you go to the HomePod page on Apple's website, oh geez, you're going to make me scroll all the way up here. You know what's funny is how hard they made macOS Monterey to find. Like they took away the preview on the front page here. Sorry for Starlink lag. Come on, Dishy. You could do it. But yeah, on the front page, there's no like quadruple UDC reference. I was doing a video on Monterey, and I was looking for just the developer preview. I was just looking for pictures of Monterey, and I was scrolling around, and then I went to Mac, and I was like, is it somewhere in here? I'm scrolling around for Mac. I was like, is it down here? Oh, here it is. Never mind. Okay, maybe I just missed it because I'm blind. Anyway, music section. You still got the HomePod there, and if you go to buy one, it still says while supplies last. So whenever they put this here, it means that they're not building it anymore. And Apple did officially announce it's discontinued, which means that if it's available, delivery is sold out, pickup is unavailable. How about the white one? Yeah, for shipping, this 1 business day free shipping. They really are trying to get rid of these, huh? It says a lot about how many people were actually buying the HomePod, given, like, here we are all these years later, and there's still... all these months later, and there's still iPads available, even though they haven't been building them for this long. Let's see. According to me, none of the iPad Pros except for the A12X, which is around $500, are worth it because the iPad Air exists. I take issue with the iPad Air because of 2 very important features for me that are probably not super important for everyday people. But the primary reason I would still take a refurbished or used iPad Pro over an iPad Air is Face ID, which is like way, way better than Touch ID, having to rest your finger on the power button every time opposed to just opening the iPad and it unlocks, and 120 hertz. So I guess average consumers probably don't care about that type of thing. But for me, at least, I notice 120 hertz a lot, and it makes a huge difference. So those two features are not on the iPad Air. Also, there's no 13-inch size, which is I really prefer. If you're going to use an iPad with a keyboard case, I would highly recommend getting a 13-inch model. I wouldn't recommend the mini LED one because it's so dang expensive, and there's basically no usable differences between that and the older iPad Pro. Yeah, there's center stage, which is kind of cool, and mini LED is a little fancy, but for the most part, if you're just an everyday person, yeah, 2018 12.9-inch iPad Pro refurbished or on Best Buy for sale or for like $900 or $800, that's going to be so much better value. They accidentally left the machine on that turns out the white HomePods. They left it running for a little bit too long. According to Detroit Borg, who ordered one of these after they were discontinued, they are all from the initial batch. Really? How can you verify that? I feel like there's no way of really knowing. But also, it's a HomePod, so I'm not shocked at all if the sales of them was so insanely low that they're still going through inventory from the first batch. Romanov Forever says, I did get a refurbished 2018 iPad Pro for the storage and for Face ID. So happy with my decision. What did you get that for? They still say copyright 2019. That's how we verified. But the HomePod came out in 2018. So I'm not sure if that's official. Did you mean 2018? I don't know. It's possible that they just don't update the paperwork on the packaging. That could be another. I'm not sure if that copyright 2020 whatever is everything. E. Hirasawa says 13 inch is good because it's an iPad meant to be at home all the time. Okay, yeah, the 13 inch is a bit less portable, especially if you're using the Magic Keyboard case. That is heavy and big. So if there's a way to not use something so big, and I guess if you're just leaving it planted on your desk all the time, you can verify through the serial number. Did he verify through that as well? I mean, it's just possible that the HomePod he bought was stored in inventory for a long time, and because it was on the back of a shelf and there were new ones coming in and being sold, it could have just been sitting in the back for a long time. I got it for streaming video and I needed storage because I live in the boonies. Yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot of people that don't have good internet. That's where Starlink comes in. Hopefully Starlink gets better. I think it's gotten better. There used to be a lot more cutouts where I'd lose the stream for like many seconds at a time. Now I just kind of lag momentarily, but usually you could still hear me. Emery says, I'm debating between an iPad Pro 11-inch or 12.9-inch. I can't decide. I would be mainly using it for note-taking, drawing, and media consumption. Which one should I get? Price is not a factor. If price isn't a factor, I mean, I would still say the 11-inch is really good, okay? For the record, I like the 11-inch. I reviewed it last year, and it felt very comfortable, and I liked it. But if you're planning on getting a keyboard case of any kind, if you're planning on typing a lot or using the trackpad with it, that's when I would say the 12.9-inch feels more comfortable. It feels bigger and more laptop-like. I have played around with an 11-inch iPad with a keyboard case, and it feels way more squished. It kind of reminds me of those old netbooks. Like when I was younger, I had a few friends and family members that had like tiny netbooks that were really small and kind of crammed. And I've seen people disagree with me and say they can get comfortable with the 11-inch. But all I would say is if you're just planning on using the iPad for the touchscreen primarily and you're not planning on using it with a keyboard or a mouse or anything, the 11-inch is great. It's very comfortable if you're going to be just using your hands on the display and that's it. But if you're looking for like laptop feeling and you want it to, you know, because my wife is always like, let's get the biggest display possible. I remember when, because, you know, she grew up with a 15-inch MacBook Pro. Not grew up. Well, she's had it for a long time. So that's kind of the default laptop size she's used to. So when I reviewed the M1 MacBook Air, I showed her, yeah, that's funny. If price isn't a factor, just buy both, you know, and send me one. I'm kidding. But I showed her the M1 MacBook Air, and I was like, honey, this is really powerful. Look at this. And she was like, it's so little. You know, the display is so small, and we use our iPad and laptop a lot for just watching content when we're in bed together. And she preferred the 15-inch because it was so much larger. And when I reviewed the 16-inch MacBook Pro, she thought that was great because she was like, wow, we got this giant display that we can fold up and put away. So my wife is kind of the type to be just like, let's get the biggest display we can. So she would absolutely prefer, if I was getting an iPad, she would rather me get the 13-inch one over the 11-inch. But if I was just, honestly, it's iPadOS being such a big disappointment and me realizing that it's no longer a hardware thing and it's more of just an Apple roadmap thing. Apple does not want the iPad to become more than it is. And kind of like what Michael's saying, 12.9 inches is very nice for note-taking since it's close to the size of a sheet of paper. It is, but it's digital, so if you want to write more notes, you can scroll down and stuff. But all I'm saying is I really enjoyed the 11-inch form factor. And the primary reason I decided to not keep the 11-inch iPad Pro was because the Magic Keyboard case had just came out. And I was like, I want the keyboard case to be as big as possible because, for those who can't tell, here's... Can I show this? These are going to be a little awkward, but it'll prove my point. It'll be worth it, trust me. Okay, here's 13-inch Magic Keyboard case, right? And then here is Magic Keyboard that I use with my iMac Pro. Spoiler alert, they're basically the same size. They're like the same layout, same form factor, whereas like the tab and caps lock and shift keys on the 11-inch Magic Keyboard case, those are pretty small, and I'm just not the type of person to recommend using a laptop that's that tiny. 11 inches is pretty dang small. Some people are fine with it. You know, my sister lived with the 11-inch MacBook Air for like 6-7 years, and when I tweeted that the people were saying Apple would never do that because they don't want to put macOS on an 11-inch display, I was like, that they've been doing 11-inch Macs for like many, many years. That's totally fine. So I didn't see that as a reason to not bring macOS to the iPad. Even then, just be like, okay, you need the bigger iPad. Who cares? But yeah, like I'm just not the type. When I reviewed the M1 MacBook Air, I was like, yeah, if I did have a MacBook, I would want a bigger one, and I ultimately don't want a what's it called? 13-inch. I don't ultimately want a laptop at all. I would prefer a desktop, but if none of the desktops I like happen, 16-inch MacBook Pro for me is like my plan D, essentially. Plan A is get the dream iMac with black bezels and no chin and great Apple Silicon, and it's an all-in-one design, and it's amazing. Although that's probably not going to happen. Plan B is like M1X Mac Mini. Just a Mac Mini that's more powerful but with really good value. Because I want something more powerful than the M1 because my iMac Pro beats the M1 in multi-core. And then Plan B and Plan C are pretty tied. I'm not like completely convinced that if the M1X Mac Mini doesn't happen, I have to get the Mac Pro. But Plan C would be Mac Pro, which is probably coming out next year with ultra heavy-duty Apple Silicon that would just be completely overkill for my work, but it would let me export videos very quickly. And the next Mac I buy, I want it to last me a long, long time. My current iMac Pro has lasted me almost 4 years, and there's nothing really inherently wrong with it. I would just be interested in switching to Apple Silicon because I prefer the real-time playback. And the M1 was better than my iMac Pro in regards to editing experience, how often the timehead would hang and how much lag there would be when playing edited content and stuff. So if everything goes wrong and my dream iMac doesn't happen, M1X Mac Mini doesn't happen, and Mac Pro happens, but it's too expensive and it's like $6,000 for 256 gig, and to actually get storage in there I have to spend $8,000. If all that goes wrong, then Plan D is probably 16-inch MacBook Pro. That would be my go-to. And I would likely dock it with an external monitor and kind of treat it like a tower that I just occasionally take with me, but probably not very often. Emery says, thank you. I will not be using a keyboard case, so I may go for the 11-inch. Yeah, I would say give it a shot, because the 11-inch, if price isn't a factor, you could at least spec out an 11-inch a little bit higher and get more storage out of it for the same price as what you would pay for the 12.9-inch. And I also thought, like, when I tried out the 11-inch, if you're just note-taking or you're just using the touchscreen and that's it, that was a really comfortable size. That was, like, really light, really portable, and it felt natural. It was like a good a good size for iPad OS to run on. The bigger size to me makes sense for the keyboard case. iPad mini is small. I'd like the Pro look if it got it. Compact and capable features anyway. Screen and Face ID, hopefully. Yeah, that would be amazing. I agree. Not the iPad Air 4, but the iPad Air 3 got updated at the same time as the Mini 5. So I was kind of hoping Apple would want to continue updating those two as like the mid-range iPads, right? Like iPad Mini is not necessarily about being cheap. That's the budget iPad, the just regular iPad they call it. That one is affordable and it's basic and it's not super fancy. It still has a home button, still has Touch ID, still has a non-laminated display, but for the average consumer who's just trying to get the bare bones minimal iPad they need, the budget iPad's great. But the Mini should not be about necessarily making a worse iPad. It's just making a more concentrated, focused iPad that's smaller for those who want it, but it should still have the same feature set as something like the iPad Air. So we got the Air 4, and we're coming up on the 1 year mark since the Air 4 came out. If we could get something smaller than the Air 4, that would be a pretty sweet price. I'm guessing, what would the iPad Mini 6 price be? About $500? I feel like there was typically about a $500 difference between the Air and the Mini. So if the Air is currently $600, wouldn't it make sense for the Mini to be $500? If you got Touch ID and the bezel-less design and Apple Pencil 2 support and the USB-C, and that's a $500 package, and it's like an 8-inch display, that sounds pretty dope. I would love that. That sounds kind of awesome. It's basically like having a little iPhone that runs iPad OS, so you have split screen support and stuff, which is kind of awesome. When I reviewed the Mini 5, I really liked it. I can't justify keeping 2 iPads, so I didn't keep it around because I was like, yeah, I'm not going to use 2 iPads regularly. But just switching to the Mini for a while, it was like I can type with just my thumbs on a device like this, but it still runs iPad OS, so I still have all those great features, plus Apple Pencil support and everything. So that's pretty dope. $500 for the redesign. I like that. Let's see. My only wanted feature for the Magic Keyboard for iPad would be the row of function, brightness, volume, etc. keys up top, but I understand there isn't room for another row. I feel like there should be like better keyboard shortcuts to change that. Honestly, I don't run into a ton of situations where I need to change the volume. Normally, if I'm watching something, just the control center volume switch or the volume rocker itself is pretty good. But I agree, if there was a way right from the keyboard, if you could just like hold command and press minus, and that would lower volume or brightness or something, that would be interesting. I would like some kind of shortcut. There probably is some Siri shortcut I don't know about. People come up with all kinds of crazy shortcuts. Super Saran Man says the iPad Mini is usually $100 cheaper. $500 for the redesign would be good. Okay, Michael's saying, someone earlier, Scott S3, thank you for the Twitch Prime for 31 months. That's a long time. And another Model Y Mike sub with Twitch Prime saying 1 + 1 is 11. He is forever knowledgeable. We cannot come close to approaching his knowledge. But Future Proof 4, thank you for the Twitch Prime as well. Everybody for the support. Appreciate it. Thank you. Chris Norton said hello. Thank you for the 100 bits. Okay, what did Cyber Octoling say? So Apple's strategy for the M1X and the Mac Pro chips is very interesting. To reduce failures, Apple has designed one chip with 10 CPU cores and 32 GPU cores, and the Mac Pro chip is just 2 or 4 of those chips on a single die instead of making a separate 2040 chip. I don't know. I remember people saying that's not possible, or that's not how that'll work. That'd be interesting if that's how they do it, but people were saying 32. So if you have, I remember people saying it would have between 16 and 32 high performance cores. So at least Bloomberg was saying that. It isn't multiple CPUs. It's multiple etches on a single wafer. Maybe. I don't understand the terminology, but I believe the Mac Pro should be substantially faster. It would feel weird if the Mac Pro was the same speed as the M1X. Not because the 14-inch MacBook Pro should be slow. Like, M1X is going to be absurdly quick, and the fact that you'll probably be able to get that in a pretty small laptop is awesome. But it would just feel weird for like a 14-inch laptop to have the same CPU as a giant tower. But we're in Apple Silicon territory now. You know, iPads and iMacs have the same chip, which is kind of weird. Y'all heard it. I'm forever knowledgeable. Anyone contends this will be knowledged. I thought you had family coming in town, Model Y Mike. Are you ignoring your company so you can watch stupid Twitch streamers? It was super scary, said Tim Cook. Presenting the MacBook Pro 21-inch because Lewis had us at gunpoint forcing us to launch one. 21 inches. That would actually be kind of interesting. Such a giant laptop. There are mentions for M1X MacBook Pro for the quadruple UDC event. Thought. A lot of people looked into that and were overreacting about it. I didn't look at it as a confirmation. I feel like the guy who sets up the Apple YouTube live stream tags probably doesn't know what's going on in the event itself. Like, in the tags, you also saw iPhone, iMac, MacBook. You saw they put as many different tags in there that were Apple related all into the tag bar. So if there are a bunch of people searching M1X and there's a YouTube guy that's trying to get the search results for Apple's event high, sure, he's going to put M1X. Also, it's one character. So I think that's a little bit small to get super excited about. Like, he very easily could have meant M1 and then he just put M1X on accident. It's like one character or something. I don't know, but I don't think that necessarily meant MacBook Pros were supposed to be unveiled there. I think it was just a marketing guy doing his best to like fill the tags with relevant search terms, and I bet they were looking at what the most common search terms were and they thought M1X was really high up there. Honestly, like that's my fundamental belief with this whole thing, is that the guy who puts the tags in YouTube live streams probably didn't know what was at the event either. That guy, I don't think, has seen the event. This event is all pre-recorded and filmed and edited, and a very small number of people actually know what was going to happen. It could have been just some intern that was setting up the YouTube live stream. They're just like, hey, put this marketing image in the thumbnail and make it say this, and he goes, okay, and he makes that the title, and he makes that the thumbnail, and then it asks for some tags, and he just looks at the most common search terms. So M1X or something like that is still coming. It's not like it's such a wild, speculative, random rumor to think that there's going to be another Apple Silicon Mac at some point. Tim Cook literally said the whole lineup, 2 years. We're past a year now. We're almost, I guess it was at the end of June. So we're almost at the 1 year mark. And yeah, it will happen. It's not like, it was making me laugh a couple months back. People were freaking out. They were like, hey, Apple Silicon iMac confirmed. We saw this one Xcode crash report that referenced it's running Apple Silicon and it's on an iMac. It's like, well, yeah, we knew that was going to happen at some point. It doesn't really mean much. So seeing M1X in the tags is like, yeah, I'm sure it exists. I don't know if that means it's coming out today or if it's coming out in 5 months. Let's see. To be honest, Apple usually does generic tags like that. It's just weird to me that Apple cares so much about the SEO that would mention an unannounced product. Yeah, it is a little weird. It's a little bit out of the ordinary, but I don't think, like, the event itself was 1 hour and 40 minutes. It did not feel like there was a noticeable part of the event that was cut out. If the event was like bizarrely short, if it was shorter than most quadruple UDCs, I'd be like, oh, maybe they were going to have MacBooks. But every part of the event flowed pretty naturally. And it seemed like everything they talked about was fairly intentional and filmed and edited to be that way with all the transitions and everything. And I don't think MacBook Pros were going to be announced like the day before and then they changed their mind and had to re-edit the whole live stream and everything. Like, I think they probably knew they weren't going to make it many months before the event actually happened. What? Tim Cook doesn't personally set up the YouTube live stream? That would be hilarious, actually. I wish he would. Tim Cook is just sitting there putting in tags. He's like, iPhone, iMac. He's doing all that stuff. The new layout on iPadOS 15 is so much more worse than the layout on iPadOS 14. Yeah, I have to agree. It's the Today view. That's what it's called. So, for those who don't know the term for it, when you go into jiggle mode on iPadOS 14, you have this keep the Today view on the home screen next to your apps. So even if you have 30 applications here, you can still have a ton of widgets along the side that you can scroll through like this. You can make that widget column as long as you want, and you have the digital time and the date up there. And I use this a lot, and I love the use of space. The apps are pretty close together. I don't have any, as you can tell, I don't have any other slides. So every app on the entire iPad is right here on this page, plus some widgets, which is really helpful for me. And you can't do that with iPadOS 15. They got rid of the Today view. So some people, I guess, don't like having a bunch of apps on their home screen, and they're like, no, I'll just use the app library. Or some people I've seen just have widgets on the home screen and nothing else. It's kind of annoying to me. I'm like, that's not a good use of space. But either way, yeah, I hope they change that. I want them to bring the Today view back, and that's why I have not put iPadOS 15 on this iPad. I'm going to try to keep it on iPadOS 14 as long as I can. I'm genuinely, like, this is the first update in a long, long time that I'm debating not switching my main machine to. As in, like, even in the fall when iPadOS 15 is open to the public and it's not in beta anymore, I'm still not sure if I want to switch my iPad. Just because of how much I'm used to that home screen, and that's what I'm comfortable with. Like, I'll probably cave in eventually. Like, right now it sounds awful, but eventually I'm sure I can't stay on iPadOS 14 forever. One day I'll probably just wake up and it'll automatically have updated, but still. Oh, well. Do you think there will be a July event for the MacBook Pro? You know, normally I would say no, because Apple almost never has, July or August events. We talked about this on the podcast today. The last August event was actually Quadruple UDC in 2006. Way back pre-iPhone, they had Quadruple UDC in August for some reason. Every other one was in June except 2006. But because it's Apple, and because it's kind of weird pandemic season where Apple does all these pre-recorded events, I won't say it's impossible, but I'm also not going to say it's likely. I have not seen any analyst or any rumor go out there that the July event is happening, or there might be an August event, or we might see another Apple event, pre-September event for iPhones. So if you were asking me to guess, I'm going to say no. I think the next Apple event will be the iPhone event in September, and we're not going to get any site refreshes or anything major until then. But at the same time, I was like, I wasn't expecting Apple to do an April 20th event this year. 420, I was like, Apple would never hold an event on 420. If that's so close to Quadruple UDC, they would rather just scrap the April event and save the hardware for the developer conference. But that's not what they did. They had it on 420, insert weed joke here, and they had a bunch of hardware to announce. It was like the biggest spring event ever. I cannot recall in recent history there being an event that took place in the spring where there was that much hardware to announce. There was a ton of crap they announced. And then, yeah, just a couple weeks later, we had the software event. So it's not impossible that maybe the MacBooks aren't as delayed as we thought, and maybe they're going to be ready in July and August, and they just decided that there was so much software stuff to cover at Quadruple UDC that they didn't want any hardware there, and they were going to reserve a hardware event for July or August. Knowing how Apple's not really following their normal train of events, that Apple almost always did iPhone events in September until last year. Then the pandemic made them do an Apple Watch and iPad event in September, and then an iPhone event in October, and then a Mac event in November. They don't normally do that many events back to back to back, so maybe they're still feeling weird and ambitious. Maybe they'll be like, August event, just for the Macs. Something like that. They could. It's not impossible, but not likely at the same time. I'm supposed to get a Mac for college. Now, the thing is, my college starts in September, and I need to get a Mac before June end. Online classes. Should I wait for the M1X MacBook? I've been waiting since March because of processor. Oh, jeez. Yeah. There's not a good solution. I guess, honestly, I still don't recommend the MacBook Pro just because it's so similar to the MacBook Air. I guess if you have to get one now, look around for a deal. If it's for college, you should be able to get the MacBook Air on a discount for like $900, or look around for a Best Buy sale or something. I do agree with Yahavras there. Like, M1X is going to be very, very powerful. I don't think a student is necessarily going to take advantage of that kind of processing power. So M1 is still plenty. And in my experience, having the M1 with fans doesn't make a huge difference in export times or performance. Like the M1 MacBook Air was crazy fast. 24-inch iMac was about the same speed. I could not tell a difference in day-to-day use. So if you need to get one by the end of this month, I would say try to find a deal on an M1 MacBook Air. Whenever you're buying an Apple product that was not just announced, like the MacBook Air was announced 7-8 months ago. Typically when you're that far into the product's life cycle, refurbished through the education store, that'll save you a bunch of money. If you're 6 to 8 months through the product cycle, it's more than likely on sale somewhere, or you can get it for a lot cheaper than retail. For most, M1 is probably fine. But if you get a discounted or refurbished MacBook Air, you'll have more money to spend on storage, or if you care about RAM, you could get some more RAM. I think RAM's kind of overrated for me, but he's saying, I need Logic and Xcode along with Blender and stuff for personal use. Yeah, my buddy Randy is using the M1 MacBook Air with Logic, and he said it's been insanely good. He's very impressed with it. So, Super Saran Man says, to be honest, considering Intel Macs are already starting to lose features on macOS Monterey, I doubt Apple wants uni students buying those older Intel MacBook Pros. So I think a July event to coincide with the back-to-school season would make sense. Yeah. Again, it's not crazy. I won't say that's ridiculous. Apple would never have a July event. They've never done that before. I'm like, this is a weird time for Apple between the pandemic and them going all out with these crazy online events, and some of these online events are less than an hour. Apple's kind of being weird here with the events, so I don't think we can look at what they've done for the past 12 years and act like that's what they're doing now. So I wouldn't necessarily count on it, though. I'm still not going to say, and if something changed, like if Bloomberg or Quo or Kang or someone with pretty decent track record came forward and said that Apple's going to have an event in July or Apple's going to have an event in August, that's when I would start thinking, okay, this might actually happen. This could be possible. But because that hasn't happened, I wouldn't assume so. Like if you need a Mac before the end of June, I'm not going to say, well, don't buy it just yet. You should wait for the potential July event that could happen. I'm like, yeah, no, just get it now. M1's fine. Let's see. This just really shows why Apple needs to update the rest of the Macs. Yeah, I was really hoping Apple wouldn't take the full 2 years to transition everything, but it is confusing. Especially right before the new school year begins, right? Like, with a lot of people wanting to upgrade. But the truth is, for most people in school, for most students, I think the M1 is fine. I don't think the M1X is like a crucial must-have for most college students and stuff. Okay, Cyber Octoling's going to do his best to explain this. According to Gurman, Apple has developed a chip codenamed Jade. Jade is 8 high-performance cores and 2 low-power cores and 32 GPU cores. For M1X, Apple will have Jade as the full 32 GPU version and Jade Cut, which is Jade but with the 16 GPU cores cut off. For Mac Pro, Apple has Jade 2C die and Jade 4C die, which are 2 or 4 Jade chips on a single die. This isn't to say the Mac Pro will run 4 M1Xs. It is just a way they are simplifying the etching process. This allows any defective Jade 2C or 4C dies to be rescued, as M1X chips should help salivate the pressure of the chip shortage. Interesting. That was very complicated, but I appreciate the way you explained it. It started to make sense for me. So basically, the Mac Pro will still have an entire system on one chip. It's not multiple chips, but... I'm sorry. I was trying to think of a way to explain that in a way that made sense, and I got confused. And then I looked at the preview for OBS on how my eyes looked, and I was like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Basically, Mac Pro fast. Fast Mac. Make the Mac go faster. Big Mac have bigger chip. Big chip go fast. There we go. I explained it for you, I think, in the most technical way possible. I think someone spiked the Apple Tesla punch bowl. Both are in a strange mindset development period. Yeah, I think Apple and Tesla have COVID, you know, business-wise. They need to get their vaccinations. Let's see. can I get the Pro Apps bundle even if the purchase decision isn't necessary for college? So I hate to say that, but you don't have to be a college student to get the Pro Apps bundle. Anybody can get it. You could be out of college for years. You just have to click the link. I don't know why they set it up that way. I don't know why they don't check if you're a student or not, but anybody can buy it. I've recommended this to several people that have not been to school for years, for decades, and they can still buy it. At no part of the Pro Apps bundle purchasing process do they ask you what school you go to. I'm probably going to end up getting arrested or something, like 30 years from now. There's just a SWAT team drops the door. They come through the windows, and they were like, did you buy the Pro Apps bundle even though you weren't a student? And I'd be like, I didn't mean to. And they're like, yes, you did. And I'll get the electric chair or something. It'll probably happen. Brilliantly explained, unsubbing from Renee after that wonderful deep dive. That would make a great 10-minute video. Understanding the Jade 2C chip that's coming to the Mac Pro, and it's just me saying, big chip big, chip go brrr. I'd like a Big Mac with a big side order of big chips. MacBook good, me want, 13 tiny, 16 better, 17 OMG, imagine. I can't tell if he's being sarcastic or not. Oh, man. Never admit anything. Oh, boy. I miss CoinX. Yeah, I missed when leaks were simple and basic and they weren't trying to sugarcoat them and this could or could not happen. And if it does happen, I'm going to take credit for it. If it doesn't happen, I'll also preference that I said it might not happen, so I wasn't really wrong. That's what I get sick of. CoinX was just this is what's happening, and I will be right, and then it happened. And then he started to go into the vague thing with the one more thing, and then it didn't happen, so it was okay. He gave up after that. He was like, every time I get something wrong, I'm going to change my name. And then maybe that's what happened. CoinX got something wrong, so he gave up and switched to Kang. And now Kang is trying to be hyper accurate. Only if Dub was 2 days late, the date would be 6/9. Ooh, that would have been so good. Dang it. He slows down his own videos, and it's really annoying. No, I haven't kept up with Rene Ritchie. Sorry. It's not anything against him. He's a fine creator, I'm sure, and I have tuned into his videos every once in a while. A bunch of people were telling me to watch his video on why everyone hates iPadOS 15 because I kept complaining about iPadOS 15, and they were like, it's kind of frustrating to me because I'm like, I don't want everyone to tell me to watch. Everyone was leaking me a video that was 30 minutes, and I was like, okay, guys, I'm not going to be working all day and spend 30 minutes watching another tech video. I spend so much of my day making tech content. I don't have the time to just play a whole 30-minute video, but I had it playing while I was editing for a while because everyone kept saying, watch this one video Renee did. They didn't say why he was right or why he brought up good points. Everyone just kept saying, watch it, watch it, watch it, watch it. And I was like, you're not saying why, but okay. So I watched the video, and I don't really understand why everybody was recommending me watch it because I was like, most of it is him going, yeah, that is frustrating. But then explaining yeah, but the iPad is supposed to be an iPad and it can't be more than that because, don't think of the M1 as a Mac chip. Think of it as A14X. And I'm like, okay, but if the A14X has gotten good enough to outperform most Intel Macs, then doesn't that mean the iPad should be doing a little bit more than it was doing 5 years ago? Because functionally, I feel like it's not really doing much different from what it was already capable of doing 5 years ago. It's got little tinkering to the software here and there, but for the most part, it's, after 11 years, I feel like it should be pretty capable, and it shouldn't be a compromise of Mac OS. It should be fully fledged. Either iPad OS should get way more pro class features and more video codecs. And yeah, I'm frustrated with iPad in its current state, but that video was just yeah, that's annoying. And everyone was like, Drew, you got to watch this. I'm like, yeah. I think we mostly agree. He probably doesn't want the dual boot thing, but ultimately the dual boot for me is a quicker way of achieving what we both want, which is the iPad to become more capable and better. Let's see. That video is Basically, iPad is iPad, Mac is Mac. One does not equal the other. But I feel like, yeah, a lot of people keep saying that of like the iPad is this fundamental different product, and because it's fundamentally different, it can't do Mac things. I was like, no one was using that argument against the mouse, although you totally could have. If there were a bunch of people suggesting, why doesn't the iPad get mouse support? I was probably on the other side of that argument. I could have said, well, because the iPad is a tablet, and if you give it a mouse, it's basically a laptop now, and the iPad's not a laptop. But then last year they gave it mouse support, and now it's a laptop. So I'm like, okay, well, if you're willing to give it a mouse and redesign the cursor and everything, now it's got a keyboard, now it's got a trackpad, and it's got the same silicon you're using in your Mac. There's so little reason to keep the software nerf. What about seamless switching between macOS and iPadOS as easy as switching apps or home screens even? That would be interesting. It would probably take more work. The only reason I suggested the dual boot macOS method is because it would require the least amount of work. You know, trying to tinker and adjust iPadOS to do all the things people enjoy about macOS is going to take years and years and years, because it's taken 11 years and we still don't have a calculator or a weather app. Apple still can't figure out how to make more than 2 apps run at the same time with the iPad display. It still feels like blown up iPhone OS. So if it's taking us this long to get where we are now, then it's going to take another 10 years for us to get, very basic features. So I was like, we could skip that whole 10-year process and just go straight to macOS dual booting now, because macOS is already doing all those things. I get that it's not the most simplistic and elegant solution, but it would be a quick one. We know you can run macOS on this chip. We know what macOS needs, and the iPad has all that hardware and more. So I'm just like, let's get this complaint over with. You can work on iPadOS on the side and make it better over time and make it improve to the point where dual booting is hardly even necessary anymore. But in the meantime, for people who are spending $2,000 on iPads, yeah, just give them the best software you got. There's no reason to limit them and say, no, iPad. Because it's an iPad, it cannot support Apple's own video codec, and I don't get it. Craig says, we don't want to do a calculator or a weather app till we can make them better than everyone else. iOS 15. Here's the best weather app even, and it still isn't on iPad. Yeah, that was a dumb logic. I don't know. I feel like the iOS team is the same team designing iPadOS. Like, iPadOS doesn't have as many people working on it or something. Nimrat says, by the way, continuing the MacBook Air talk, it's 90,000, rupees? Is that what it is? Which is about $1,200, and the education discounts are highly restricted to a number of selected colleges who have higher fees. There's a smaller discount of $100 off. Makes it $1,100 for a MacBook Air in India. Okay, well, whatever the price of the MacBook Air is, I'm pretty confident it's cheaper than the MacBook Pro, right? That's the main reason I was recommending it over the Pro. Let's see. You hold iPad up to iMac and it becomes macOS on iPad, like universal control. You see, Apple would put iPadOS on the iMac. Oh, Starlink, come back. You can do it. Oh, weird. We'll put iPadOS on the Mac. Well, that is kind of funny, though. Haven't they let you run... They let you run iPad apps and iPhone apps on the Mac, because the Mac is now running and being powered by Apple Silicon. Sorry for the lag. I see it too. It fixed itself. Just give it a moment. So they're comfortable with the iPhone and iPad apps running on a Mac, even though the Mac doesn't have a touchscreen and you have to interact via the mouse. Man. Dishy's having a hard time today. I'm sorry. Oh, well. I'm Starlinking. Please come back. It's interesting that the messages load. I'll say sorry 1 sec. Man, he really can't make up its mind. You okay? OBS, why can't you just pick a bitrate? I don't understand why live streaming has to change the bitrate so much. I will motivate Starlink. Okay. Now it's randomly decided it wants to come back. Go, Starlink, go. It's so frustrating because it's like it's an annoying amount of lag, but it's not enough for me to switch back to Comcast because it's rare enough. It's like 3% frame drops. Oh, well. But, yeah, why aren't they okay with Mac apps running on the iPad, given it's running the same silicon as the Mac apps, which they're advertising? Now Mac can run iPhone and iPad apps, even though there's no touchscreen. Yeah, I agree. It's very odd that they advertised the amount of RAM in the new iPads, but they didn't explain as to why that's a good idea. They literally had it on the chart. They're like 8 and 16 gigs of RAM now. And it was like, cool, what does that do, Apple? And they're like, it has 16 gigs of RAM now. And we're like, why? Why does it need 16 gigs of RAM? It's an iPad. And they're like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. Who cares? Don't even think about multitasking. How much RAM does it have? Oh, 16. You should get the bigger one. It has 16 gigs of RAM. That's interesting. It's 3:45 in India. For me, it's 3:16 p.m. But we should probably wrap up. I think it's time for my weekend. It's been a very long week. I guess it's been like 6 days in a row. But I do appreciate the bits. I appreciate the Twitch Primes, and I'm glad that the majority of people do agree with me on most of the announcements this week. And I'm going to go camping now, so that should be fun and get some time to relax and rejuvenate my brain. And I appreciate you all for watching, and I hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Happy Saturday, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.